Hey guys, and welcome back. My name is James, and today I'm going to be making some very simple card holders. Now the idea is to make 10 today in one day. Let's see if I can do that in order to put them up on my Etsy page for you guys to have some cool gifts to offer to your friends and family. So there we go. I've got a very simple template today. It's just a two-piece card holder. As you can see, I'm using some relatively good cardstock here as a template, and one thing that's really fun with this, or really good about this specific cardstock, is that it comes from a gift bag or a gift box, which has a slightly rugged surface on the top. I don't know if you can see that, guys. It's hopefully it will be in focus, but it has a slightly rugged surface, which means that it actually holds on really well to the back side of leather. Yeah, just an added bonus, which makes it even easier to use as a template. You could obviously make this for yourself at home. All you need to do is take out one of your credit cards or whatever and place it down on a piece of paper and draw around it to get an idea of the size, and then with a ruler or straight edge just trace out the pattern that you want and cut out. So it's a very simple pattern for anyone who wants to start off in leathercraft, and it will enable you to practice a lot and to make some really cool things. I am using 1.2mm vegetable tanned leather. It is a natural finish, so nothing added to it. We will be dyeing it using Fibing's dye in golden brown, and using some really nice Maisie thread, 0.6mm thread, to get some nice stitching contrast going. Yeah, you know what, guys? Let's jump straight into it. As mentioned, we're using some Fibing's professional oil dye in golden brown. Now the oil dye or the pro dye are basically the same thing as far as I'm concerned. Do not get their normal, simply called dye, because it's not for vegetable tanned leather, because it's much stronger. I'll just show you quickly. So if you're new to leathercraft and looking into getting some Fibing products for yeah, for your natural vegetable tanned leather, or any vegetable tanned leather in that for that sake, bear in mind you can find two different types, and this was very confusing to me when I started off. You've got the oil or the pro dye and the simple leather dye. Now the leather dye is much more, it's basically much stronger than this stuff, and it will dry out vegetable tanned leather really fast. Do not use this on vegetable tanned leather. It will work, but it will dry out your vegetable tanned leather. This is great for chrome tans and for any other types of leathers that might not be as subtle, let's say, and as delicate to changes and dyes as vegetable tanned leather would be. So I'm using the oil dye or the professional dye. Either one of those work brilliantly. If you're new to my channel, you'll soon find out that I do things in a very specific way. So I use ethanol absolute, which is basically just pure alcohol, and I dilute my dyes roughly 50-50, and this again is very much a rough guesstimate of how things should be done. At least this is how I do it. Ah, damn, this container is leaking. I need to change containers after this. Well, no worries, we'll just make sure we change containers after this has been done. Except that means now I want to get a clean mat here, or clean-ish, at least a dry mat. So yeah, I'll change this around and come back in a sec. As mentioned before, this is pure vegetable tanned leather, or I don't know about pure, but it's good, simple, natural vegetable tanned leather. So before adding in any dyes, I am going to add in a coat of neatsoot oil. This will help several things. First of all, avoid the leather drying out too much, and help, in theory, spread out the dye and the pigments throughout the piece better. So yeah, again, test this at home. You don't want to put too much, just a small amount, just to make sure it's moisturized and not going to dry out on you while you're dyeing. Now, using this alcohol and dye mix, you want to be very careful not to spill, and you can go ahead and use it in quite big quantities if you're mixing it up like this, simply because it's not as potent as it would be fresh from the bottle. The reason I do this is because it gives me more control over my dye. It means that I can go ahead and do more different passes and coats and get a more even finish. As always, this is a process that I've been testing out for myself, and I strongly advise you to test it out yourself and see what works for you, because as I often say, your leathers will be different, your tools will be different slightly, it's never going to be exactly the same, and so it will react differently to dyes than what you might see in my videos. So use this as a starter, as a base maybe, yes, to start off from, but don't assume that because it works for me it will work for you. Yeah, you always want to test out first. As you can see, I'm applying it quite liberally. Don't worry, it will dry and it will even out as we go. So this is normal at this point to see lots of contrast and differences in the different areas of the leather. And with the successive coats, it will even out quite neatly, and you'll see. Especially since we're doing some relatively small pieces, you won't be able to see much of the marks, if any, on the final pieces from the dye process. At least that's the goal, and that's why I dilute the dye beforehand. I'm hoping to achieve a relatively dark colour here with this golden brown. You don't need to go this dark with this dye. It's a really nice natural looking dye that doesn't need to be very dark to show a really gorgeous rich colour, but in this case I'm going to go very dark because I want to accentuate the difference between the leather and the stitching later on in the build process. And as you can see, it's quickly drying out anyway, and not as dark at all anymore as it was a second ago. I do think my mix may not be very strong at this point. I think I don't have enough dye in my alcohol mix. So I am worried about doing too many coats at this point, because it will dry out my leather quite substantially if I keep putting on alcohol onto the top of it. So I think I'm just going to do one last coat and we'll leave it at that, and hopefully it will be dark enough for my liking. So let this dry for a couple of seconds, if not a minute or two, and then we'll go ahead and apply some conditioner, some finish basically. Guys, it's been about a minute now and the colour is looking quite nice. It's not necessarily as dark as I'd like, but in all fairness it will look a bit darker once you finish the next steps, so I'm happy with this and I'm going to carry on from here. I'm going to be using Saphir Renovateur on this. Now, bear in mind this is specific for old dried out leathers and maybe overkill for this project, but there are two things that I like about this. The first thing is that it will moisturize deeply this leather and mean that all the dryness from the dyeing process will be taken away. And secondly, this thing has a bit of wax inside it. It does have a bit of wax, which means that it will start waxing up the surface and giving us a really nice finished, polished looking surface, which is why I'm using this in this case. But if you haven't been dyeing your leather too much, you might just want to use a simple polish like a Pat Deluxe. The reason I use polishes at this stage is simply because it enables me to start protecting, first of all, nourishing the leather, but also protecting the leather throughout the next few steps of the process from different scratches and stuff. Now, you could easily scratch it anyway. This is vegetable tanned leather and gets scratched very easily, so be careful with it, whatever you do. But I like to polish at this stage and not at the later stage, simply because I find it's easier in general to do it on a big piece now than to do it on several little pieces later on. So, let's get going. Now, Saphir Renovateur is a great product to use. It's really easy to apply, and a little bit goes a really long way. And I like to apply it with my fingers because it gives me quite a lot of control, but more importantly, the warmth of my fingers theoretically help the waxes and helps the product be absorbed into the leather. So yeah, you might want to use a rag, a cloth, if you're using your fingers without any gloves or protective gloves. You might want to use your fingers directly, although I wouldn't recommend doing it too often without any protective gloves on you. But in this case it works well for me, and I just like to make sure it's spread nice and even. This can leave marks if you don't spread it well. It will be absorbed differently and leaves dark streaks if you leave any lines, so make sure it spreads out evenly and let it dry a bit before going on to the next part of the process. So yeah, just take your time and enjoy. Once that's done, guys, just let it sit for a couple of minutes again to let the oils be absorbed and the waxes dry off, and then you'll just have to buff it off with a rag, or just even better, a bristled brush like this one, and that will give you a gorgeous shine to the product, and you can start moving on to the next step. Now comes the interesting time, guys, of marking out our template onto the piece of leather. As I mentioned, this specific piece of cardboard has a really cool little overlay, or I don't know what to call it, but top layer, which means it doesn't slip around very much, or at all, on the piece, which is really nice. But you can basically use anything you've got at home. In this case, as I mentioned, it was a present box, or a box, presentation box. But you could use cereal packets. The cardboard from cereal boxes works really well for this as well. Since I'm going to be making a lot of these in a row, I am going to do the pattern scribing a bit differently than I would normally do it. It would be usually as simple as just placing your pattern down and drawing a line around it on the back piece of your leather and then cutting it out. But since I'm going to be making hopefully 10 of these, if this piece allows, I'm going to mix things up a bit here. So I'm able to get 7 out of here. Yeah, I'm just going to start scribing first and we'll see what happens. So the idea is simply to go ahead and place this down and do that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I need 3 more, so I'll just do them here quickly. And for this one, I am not going to draw a whole line. I'm just going to do it freehand simply because it's faster. So guys, I have my 10 patterns all laid out here. Now bear in mind that 10 patterns only makes me 5 of these card holders, and I set out to make 10 today. I may have to go ahead and dye some more leather and make another piece in a different colour and see if I can mix and match. It could be quite fun. Stick around for that. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and cut these and see what we do about the rest later. So the whole reason why I wanted these straight lines now should become very apparent to you guys. It's simply because I can cut them much faster. Following those lines and get all my pieces out in a timely manner. There you are, guys. We have our 10 pieces of each, which means we have 5 card holders ready to go. I'm going to go ahead off camera and duplicate this process with a new piece of leather in order to have a total of 20 pieces of each in order to make 10 card. Wait. Yeah. So, yeah. So sorry about that, guys. I'm brain fart for a second there. So I want 20 pieces of each total to make 10 card holders, and the way it will work is that you've got these 2 main pieces that come together like this, and on either side you have a small piece that goes on like this. Simple as that, and then you stitch all around here, leaving the top edge open, and that gives you a neat little card holder. Now, obviously we are going to burnish the edges and make this look much better, but that's the main idea. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll be back with you very shortly. Guys, we're back, and I have my 20 pieces of each. That is to say, there were 10 of these, 10 of these, 10 of these, 10 of these. So just out of curiosity, this is the difference between the golden brown and the dark brown. Bear in mind it can get much darker than this. It's just that with my 50-50 mix, I'm able to control the darkness, and I stopped at this point. So you can see the golden brown has got that extra gold in it, that richness, the warmth in it, that makes it a bit more, makes it pop out a bit more. But the golden brown is absolutely very classic, and yeah, either way, gorgeous colours, very subtle. I'm not going to be matching these. I'm just going to be making them straight as they are. So the next part now is going to be taking care of all the top edges of all the pieces, not the edges that will be around, but just the top edges, which will bevel using a Barry King's tools. edge beveler. This is a number 1 or number 0, I believe, edge beveler. We are going to dye the edges and burnish them, and then we might add in a crease mark. Actually, we will. Let's add in a crease mark, and we should be good to go. I'm noticing that my beveler isn't necessarily as sharp as I'd like it, so to sharpen it, it's a very simple trick here. Just take a piece of very fine sandpaper. In this case, it's sandpaper made specifically for metal, in theoretically, and but any very fine sandpaper will do. And just lay it on top of one of your needles, and that will give you a very, very fine edge here. And you just scrape it along, basically run it along that needle edge just gently a few times, and that should do the trick of sharpening your edge beveler nicely here. And depending on the size of your edge beveler, you'll want different sizes of needles, or any round straight edge basically you can wrap something like this around. And in theory this should make it much better. There, it has a bit better. Bear in mind that doing the flesh side, or the rough side of leather, is always a bit harder than doing the flesh side. Flesh side wants to cut really well, whereas the underside is a bit tougher to use, or to cut, because the fibers all haphazardly placed in the leather. Okay guys, we've done the 10 of each, or the 5. This is very confusing. The 10, 5, 20, how many are there? So basically there are 10 pieces of these, so this makes, again, as I mentioned, I keep mentioning it's 5 of these. So we've done the 5 card holders in golden brown, and we still have to burnish the edge, but before that, off camera, I'm going to do the dark brown as well. To do the edge burnishing, I'm using Tokonol, which is an amazing little product for edge burnishing. It's like a sort of gum slash... it's a gum, basically, and it does a great job at burnishing. I find that I used to use gum trag, but since I've discovered Tokonol, I cannot go back, and it's totally true. I just can't go back to gum trag. It's not the same at all. Now, the nice thing about having so many of these up here is that we can just go ahead and spread it quickly like this. And don't worry about spreading it perfectly, because you'll be spreading it with the burnishing process afterwards. Just make sure you don't get too much all over the place, because it can get a bit dirty otherwise. There we go. Move this out of the way. Place that delicately down there. Now I'm using a cotton glove, simple cotton glove, and this enables me to be extremely precise for my burnishing. Now this is still relatively new to me, using the glove, so I'm not totally sure how I'm supposed to hold it, but it does an amazing job at burnishing. It enables me to be very, very precise with the way I'm holding it. I can just pinch the leather between 2 fingers and just burnish like that, and it's really quite good. If you're interested in picking up any of the items you see me use, I've got links to most of them, if not all of them, down below on Amazon, where you can find them. And bear in mind that any purchase you make through those links helps me out, because I get a small kickback on the money you're sending to Amazon, as a partner to Amazon, basically. So yeah, if you see anything you're interested in picking up, go and check out the links down below, because chances are, by buying yourself something nice to work with, you're helping me out as well. So yeah, everyone wins. There you have it guys, all the edges have been burnished, and the next step is going to be adding a crease line all along these edges. Bear in mind guys, the crease line does absolutely nothing apart from just add a piece of decoration and finish to the final piece basically that you're making. So it's just here for decoration, and I have to say it does finish off the end really neatly, so very pleased with that. Next part is going to be skiving around the main edges and gluing this thing up. The next part of the process is going to be to skive the inside of these main pockets. The reason for this is twofold. First of all, it will reduce the amount of leather between, the thickness of the overall piece, but only a bit, because that's not the main reason for me right now. The main reason I'm doing this is to give the glue somewhere to hold on to, because it's going to have a hard time holding onto this top surface, which is quite sleek, and especially after it's been oiled and waxed, the glue won't want to be able to adhere. So I'm just going to skive off a bit where the overlapping pockets will be, and this will help the glue grab onto something. The idea isn't to take off much, and you don't really need it to be perfect. You just need to take off enough that you have access to the fleshy side, which is underneath the top layer of leather. That's better. Guys, I want to take a minute here to say, yes, my skiving technique is really poor. There are certainly better ways of doing this, I know, and this is one of the things I need to practice. But in my defense for this project, we don't need something perfect, and I'm just trying to go as fast as possible, simply because, well, as fast as possible while remaining quite consistent and keeping some quality left in my work. If I want to do this properly, I probably would take a different tool, such as this one, which would enable me to have a very nice straight edge. And I'll try and show you what I mean on this. But even with this, I'm still not very proficient at skiving. Skiving is one of my big weaknesses. But this does enable me to have a nicer looking edge, if only marginally nicer. I know you're supposed to be going something like this, but again, I'm not very good at this, so I don't know. I think it's... See guys, this is what I mean by you have to practice your skills and arts. Skiving is one hell of a tough thing to learn. Yeah, something like that. But as you can see, that's taking me way too long for what I'm trying to do here. So I'm not doing it like that. I'm not doing it properly. Again, this is my method. I strongly advise you to learn to do things properly, and sometimes my methods aren't the proper way of doing things. Did I say sometimes? I meant often my method is not the proper way of doing things. So yeah, learn to do it properly from the start, and you won't end up looking a fool on camera like me. But hey, if you guys can learn anything from my videos, then even if a lot of it is, well, even if a lot of what I do is useless to you guys because it's not very well done, even if you can learn a bit, well, I'm happy. And you know what, guys, at the end of the day, this is supposed to be for entertainment's sake more than educational value. So I'm not going to worry too much about it. I mean, I love to hear your thoughts, guys, in the comments below, and if you have any input about videos or places I can go to learn to skive properly, then I'd love that. And I still have to practice a lot, but in the meantime, I'm happy enough with the way I do things, so I don't know. Come on, let's finish this, get it out of the way, and stop talking about my bad skiving. Now what you want to do with neoprene glue is apply it to both surfaces that you want to glue together and let it dry to the touch, which in this case is good to go. And then when you apply, in theory, it will never budge. This glue is good to go for years to come, if done properly. And then make sure you press down to get rid of any pockets of air, and also to make sure that everything is firmly in place as it should be. And we're starting to see it come together. This is the fun part of the whole process for me, gluing it up and finally seeing it come to life. These have been left to dry for a couple of hours now because I was off doing some other stuff, but it's time now to glue everything together in their final resting shape. So I've already gone ahead and done these ones off camera, so I'll just show you these ones quickly, but the process is incredibly simple, as you'll see right now. The nice thing about working on so many different items at once is that by the time you finished all of them, the first ones are all ready to be put together, and it's as simple as just lining up this top edge really. The rest of it should fall into place more or less. There'll always be some edges that aren't perfect, but the important part is to line up the top edge as best as possible, and the rest of it will be evened out at a later time. Now I've got a piece of leather in my flat pliers here, which I'm just going to be using to press down all the edges, making sure that the contact is perfect. Now you could go ahead and hammer it out, it might be a bit faster, but as it's getting on late in the day and my neighbours won't enjoy me hammering, I'm using this technique as well, which gives you more precision and is less likely to leave a mark versus a hammer blow that you may have missed. So yeah, and that's the final result, starting to look like a final result. Now once you've glued everything up, I would always suggest to leave them overnight if you can, just to make sure that the glue has all the time it needs to cure, and come back tomorrow, do the final sanding, stitch it all up, final edge bevel and edge burnish, and we're good to go. So yeah, looking quite good so far, quite happy with this as it is. We're just going to leave it, as I said, overnight, and I'll come back tomorrow to continue the process. I've let this dry overnight, guys, to make sure that the glue has completely bonded with the leather and with itself, to make sure that it's very hard, or at least as hard as possible. Now at this stage I'm going to do basically the edge sanding, and I'm doing this in a few quick steps. First of all, I've got some 80 grit sandpaper here, then I'll follow it up with some 120 grit and then some 240 grit. Now the idea is not necessarily to do an amazing job, the perfect job. The most important part is to make sure that all these edges are nice and flush with each other. We're going to try and go relatively fast because we've got 10 card holders to do. I would otherwise go one by one and really take my time, making sure that I get as good a sand as possible in order to maximize my chances of getting a good burnish. But since I've got so many to do, I'm going to go ahead and do it a bit faster than I would normally. Let's get going. There you go, guys, that's one done. I have 9 more to go, so I'm going to do them off camera and get back to you. But yeah, the idea really is to make sure, I'll show you. The idea really is to make sure that your edge is as smooth as possible for the next step in the process. I will be beveling all around here to make sure that we get rid of these rough surfaces, or the edges here which are a bit rough. But at least this is really nice and smooth and ready for the next few steps. So I'll go ahead and do the 9 other card holders and get back to you. All of my card holders are now nice and straight along the edges, but as you might be able to tell on camera, there is a lip all around most of them, and that comes from pressing it down to be able to sand it. So the way I take care of this is very simple. I just grab my edge beveler once more and go ahead and take that lip off. Here we go. There we go, as simple as that. I might need to refine it a bit with some sandpaper, but the main idea is that. So as I just mentioned, yeah, let's go ahead and do this now. I could do it later once I've done all of them, but just to show you quickly on this one what I mean by refining it, just notching off all the extra pieces that might have stayed stuck on there, and give it a quick rub down, just like that, just to make sure we're getting off all the extra little fibres that may not be, that may be a bit loose, basically. That's the idea. You really don't need much, just a question of cleaning this up a bit before you go to the next step. I'm using my 240 grit sandpaper here. Again, you don't want to do much, it's just a question of cleaning this up before you go to the next step, which is going to be adding in your dye once more and doing the burnish on the piece. Guys, I've finished burnishing 5 of these, the gold and brown ones, and they're looking really nice. Now, just as a comparison, this is what it looks like just with the dye. Now, once I've burnished it once with the cotton glove, I go ahead and sand it very, very lightly with the 240 grit sandpaper, and then go ahead and apply more toconal and burnish a second time to get a really nice, luscious looking burnish. Now, theoretically, if I wanted to do this really, really well, I might actually go ahead and do it again a third time. This is to say, with the sandpaper, score it very slightly just to remove some of the unevenness, and go ahead and use more toconal and burnish it once more. But as I have 10 of these and I really don't want to be here for another week, I'm going to go ahead and just do it twice. So far this project has taken me just about a day to do. I did leave these overnight, so I expect the whole thing to be roughly about 10 hours, so 1 hour work per card holder, and that's doing it in a batch, which means you always gain some time doing things as a batch. But yeah, it's taken me a bit longer than planned to do all this, but I'm very happy with the results, so I'll get cracking on doing the same thing with the dark brown ones. Guys, the burnishing is done on all of them now, and I'm really pleased with the way it came out. It did take me a bit longer than planned. I knew it would take me longer than planned. It always does take me longer than I plan things, but really pleased with the way these are turning out. They're looking really like some nice little card holders now. Last thing to do is to stitch all around and add the final details. Now, I am going to be using, let me see, I am going to be using these stitching punches from Crimson Hides. These really help me get a gorgeous stitch very fast and efficiently. Now, if you're doing saddle stitching, you might want to learn to use an awl properly, like this one, and punch your holes one by one. But I find that using one of these babies will basically accelerate the process tenfold. It's going to go so much faster by doing this. Obviously, it's not all the same kind of technique, and they're not necessarily used every time for the same things. And there are some days when I absolutely need, for some projects, to go ahead and use this hand punch awl instead of the pricking irons. But today we're using pricking irons. As I mentioned, these are from Crimson Hides, and I have been blown away always by the quality of their product so far, and I do recommend that. If they're a bit pricey, as all good quality products are, good quality tools are, but if you're looking to improve your stitching and you're a newcomer in the leathercraft world, definitely check out Crimson Hides, because they have some gorgeous products, and this does enable me to do amazing saddle stitching, so I'm really pleased with that. I'm also going to be using Maisie Superfine Linen Thread in 0.6 millimeters. So this is their Maisie M60 MS006. So M60 is the size, that is 0.6 millimeters sizing. They have an M40 which is 4, and then 50 which is 0.5. This is the M60, and the MS006 is a reference to the color, which is a sort of cream color here, and I think this will look really nice. So I'm going to do all the stitching and punching and stitching off camera and just show you guys the result when I'm done, because otherwise it's going to be a bit of a tedious process. I'm going to be watching a video while I'm doing this, keeping myself sort of mentally sane while I go ahead and stitch these 10 card holders, and I'll be back with you guys in a sec. Now that all my creases are done, the last thing I have to do is go around with another cotton rag and just make sure that I spread these waxes evenly and get rid of all the excess. Once that's done, I am glad to report that these will finally be finished. So again, I'm using pure 100 cotton gloves, and as you can see, these ones have definitely need a wash. The nice thing about these, you just put them in boiling water with a bit of detergent for about half an hour, and it will get rid of most of it, and it should be relatively clean. Or just bang it in your clothes washer, basically. Whatever you use to wash your clothes works just as well, except that I like to do it separately just to avoid mixing any of these colors with my regular clothes. So yeah, here we go. As you can see, there is still a build-up of wax, which is totally normal. It's just a question of rubbing it until the wax warms up to get rid of the excess, and then you're golden, basically. Good to go. Now, I've applied quite a lot of wax, so this process isn't the easiest, but it's not hard, it just takes a bit of time. There you go. All nice and ready. So I'll just do this on all 3 sides, and then I'll do it on the other 9 card holders, and I'll get back to you with the final result. Guys, the card holders are finally finished. It's taken me maybe about 10 hours, maybe just over 10 hours, so more or less 1 hour per card holder, and that's doing everything in batch, which generally saves time. So if I were to be doing them one by one, it would obviously take me a bit longer than 1 hour per card holder. Overall, very happy with the way these turned out. These are very simple, but very effective, I think. The design is a very classic design, so hopefully it will be the kind of thing that matches most people's needs and most people's styles. Yeah, the colours came out really nice and even. A nice subtle difference between the two. One is slightly darker than the other, and adds for a bit more of a classic feel, but the nice contrast with the threads is looking really great. So very happy about that. The crease lines turned out awesome, and yeah, I can't wait to send them out to you guys. So as a reminder, I do this in my spare time, and I have great fun working on Leathercraft, and I'm just very happy to be able to share the bits of knowledge that I may have with you guys. I'm not an expert by any means, but I do enjoy this craft very much, and I enjoy sharing it with you guys. And I made these 10 card holders for my Etsy shop so that you guys can, if you want to, purchase them for Christmas presents. It's the perfect time for Christmas presents, and these will make great little gifts for people. So yeah, if you're looking to pick up a fun little present for someone you know for Christmas, then why don't you consider these? It's a great way of helping me out, helping my channel out, and giving your friends something really cool for Christmas. And if you're not ready to make the financial investment just yet, don't forget that a great way of supporting me, my channel, and what I do here is just simply subscribing to my channel and leaving a comment down below. Let me know what you think of this video, of what I make, and leave a thumbs up, and that really, really helps. So in the meantime, guys, thanks a ton for being with me today. Thanks a ton for following this video. Hopefully you've learned something, and I'll see you very soon for some more Leathercraft.